anybody that wanted to help out with leading the youth group to come to a meeting. And in that meeting, I had a book that we were going to go through, and it was character lessons from various people in the Old Testament. And this guy, said this seriously, Pastor, we don't need the Old Testament. And my wife said, you should have seen how red your ears were getting. And I'm like, wait, what do you mean we don't need the Old Testament? But I do think there is a mindset like that. There are people that we're New Covenant Christians. We have the New Testament, and I would say that most pulpits across this country preach out of the New Testament almost exclusively. Well, we just finished a trip through Paul's letter to the church at Colossae, church to the Colossians, and let's hear what the Apostle Paul himself, who we just listened to for the last few months, let's hear what he said about the Old Testament scriptures. Romans 15:4, for whatever was written in former days was written for our instruction, that through endurance and through the encouragement of the scriptures we might have hope. Paul says that the Old Testament brings encouragement. One of the primary reasons that the Old Testament brings encouragement is that it speaks of Christ. One theologian has said, and I don't remember who it was, but I feel like it would probably be sinful to take credit for something that somebody else said. So one theologian has said, in the Old Testament is Christ concealed, in the New Testament is Christ revealed. So here's the issue. You do have to dig a little deeper. You do have to study a little more. But when you do the work and you dig a little deeper in the Old Testament, you will find some absolute treasure. And that treasure that you will find is Christ. It's my hope that you will grow in your love of Jesus as you learn from the Old Testament. So for today's purposes, we're going to take an introductory look at the book of 1 Samuel. We're going to look at the setting, the subjects, and the Savior. Now, as we begin our look at the setting of 1 Samuel, I want to take you back to the book of Genesis. And you say, Pastor, why in the world would you go to Genesis to talk about the setting of 1 Samuel? And to that I reply, I'm very glad you asked. There are two key passages in this book of beginnings that are helpful for us in understanding 1 Samuel and also the culture of the people in the Old Testament. Genesis 3:15. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. And then Genesis 22:17 and 18. I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. We see in that first passage in Genesis 3:15, it is an announcement that to Eve, that at some point from your offspring is going to come the Savior of mankind. There will be an anointed one. There will be a deliverer who will rescue mankind from the sin that Adam and Eve had just fallen into and cursed mankind with. And so, and her, this battle between the two, but he is going to be victorious. That's really the first announcement, a proclamation of the gospel in Scripture is found in Genesis 3:15. Genesis 22, it becomes clear that the Savior would be a descendant of Abraham, the father of the Jewish people. This word given to Abraham, Abraham will be blessed, and through his offspring, all peoples on earth will be blessed. Again, this is a reference to the coming one, the coming Savior, the anointed one who would come. And so you need to understand from the point in history when God promised a Savior, from the offspring of a woman, it became the hope of many women that they would give birth to the Savior. Think about that. From that point on, you're going to have a child. You're pregnant, thinking, could it be me? Could I be the one that's going to bring forth the anointed one, that deliverer, that one who will set things right and ultimately bring forgiveness and hope and restoration to mankind? Could I be that one? Abraham is promised that through his offspring all nations of the earth would be blessed, and yet none of his children were the promised one. Moses is given the law of God, and in that law it became obvious that there would be a need for a Savior who could actually keep God's law. The sacrificial system is a visual depiction of Christ as the coming mediator between God and man, and yet he had not yet come. As we approach the book of 1 Samuel, we're in a situation where mankind still looks for the one who is anointed of God. And Joshua, the people of Israel, after Joshua, the people of Israel were left without a true leader. When's the ultimate Messiah going to come? When's this anointed one going to come?